Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you are here or watching it later as a recording. We have gathered here and have a wonderful guest, Pallas, Augustine, who will be talking about astrology and the I see in astrology in connection to the ancestors and being more aware of the patterns in our ancestry. So that's our theme today. But before we dive in, let's settle. And we do that in a way that we make a prayer. So I invite you to find your peace. You can close your eyes or whatever way you want. So we just settle in our hearts, feel the connection to the earth, and set the intention that this gathering might be good for all of who showed up here or will show up later. But also what is generated here might be really good in whatever way, direct or indirect, for the bigger world. And I'm asking you, dear well and wise ancestors and spirits, our helping spirits, spirits of the lands, goodness in the earth, goodness in the world, kindness, and that what holds the world together, please bless this space. May it be a helpful space for people who came here. May all who came here get what they need. May it be something that their soul desires to know or will be helpful on their path forward. May it be really good for all of them, and may it trickle through indirectly or directly beyond to the world, so it can generate goodness, kindness, and useful insight for better relationships with humans and other than humans. Thank you to the stars, and thank you to life with all its ups and downs. May we move with integrity. Thank you. Okay. So then we can start. I will shortly introduce you to our meeting today, what we will be doing. After the short introduction, Pallas has prepared a presentation for us, which I am also very, very eager to witness and take in. So Pallas is amazing. She writes and teaches about the earth, the sky, and humans' place of connection between the worlds. Pallas is author of the I See, an Astrology of Coming Home, co-founder of Idola Stellarum, an avenue for the practice of relational astrology and magic, and a practitioner in training with ancestral medicine, grounded in their prairie Canadian upbringing with a scholarly background in environment, literature, and culture. Pallas' works guides those cultivating profound trust and rootedness in the shared reality of being alive and embodied at this pivotal point in history toward deepened connection with our non-human and non-living kin, as well as to each other. And I got to know Pallas through our ancestral lineage healing practitioner training. It's a couple of years ago already. So they are an amazing astrologer who published this book, which I highly recommend. It's about the IC and very much connected and exploring the themes of the ancestral legacy and connected to the ancestors. And what I love about Pallas' approach is that they are really aware of how important the bigger life web is, and to be in good relationship with others, meaning not only with other humans, but really being aware of all the beings, and may it be animals or spirits or stars, are actual people, and having this awareness, then we go in life in another way. So glad to have you here. Thank you for coming. And before I hand the word to you, I would just shortly name what we're up to here. So we will have this presentation from Pallas, and then we'll go a little bit on some interview questions in an interview style more. And then we will have a little practice as well. So we don't only chat and work with our, brains, but we also ground and practice that's what we're talking here about in a way. And then we come back and have a question and answer time. So you can bring your questions or shares that you'd like to bring here. The recording here, we're recording our event, our gathering, and this will be then uploaded in the Ancestral Healing GE website, where there is like a list of videos about ancestors and specific themes with amazing colleagues. So thank you, Pallas, for coming, and I'm handing now the word to you.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's so good to be here. It's so good to be here with all of you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the beautiful space you hold and the beautiful space you set. And yeah, thank you to everyone listening now and everyone listening on the recording, and for some trust and vulnerability in taking on what is sort of a strange topic, especially if you're not that familiar with astrology. It can be very strange. And if you are familiar with astrology, it is a underappreciated point in the chart that is really important to what we're doing here when it comes to ancestral connectedness. And yeah, I'm very, very pleased. So if you have not seen your astrological chart before and you don't know where your IC is, should I do that, or do you want to do that, Anna? We're going to show you how to find it.
Yeah, I could do it.
It looked good
Let
on your
me.
screen from how you had it.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me. So I will show you now.
I'll put the link
For
in the
those of
chat.
you, thank you. For those of you who have not the astrological chart, your personal chart, there is a simple way to look it up, and I will share my screen now. So you go to, for example, astro.com, and when you go to astro.com, you go to this button there. Sorry, now you see, and there you go to free horoscopes, and there you go to horoscope drawing and data, and then extended chart selection, and here you either add I have already me here in the list, but you would add your birth date, birth time. It's necessary for you to know your birth time if you want to know more specifically your chart and ascendant and descendant. Pallas will talk about it more about ascendant and descendant. But so the birth time, birthplace, and your name, and the date, and then here you choose your natal chart wheel, and in the default, you can choose whole signs, because Pallas will also in their presentation use the house system whole signs. So it will be more simple to not get confused to use also this, and then you click on show your chart. That's how you can look it up. So I will stop now sharing and hand back the word to you.
I put the written instructions in the chat in terms of the steps that you go through in order to find that. And you guys can do that while I show start to get into it. And if you're having trouble with that, just listen and we can help you when we get to the Q&A later in our time together today. It's not necessary for you to enjoy what I'm about to show you to know this part of your chart already. I'm going to just sort of place you in the chart from an embodied directional sort of place, and we'll chat about the IC in a more theoretical, cosmological kind of way. And then I'll show you some things to do with your own IC. And for those of you attending live, I will send Anna these slides so that you can have them for reference as well. And there's also a little bonus at the end too, and that's your prize for registering. Well, those of you who are listening to who properly registered for this, rather than watching the video way later. So, the IC and the ancestors. Let's get into it. So, brief outline. We will, oh, yeah, I want you up there. I want you get everybody down at the bottom. There we go. So, the outline of today. We'll try to keep this pretty brief. I can be wordy, but we will try. So we think about how to find the IC. We think about what is the IC, and then I show you a little bit about how to think with your IC personally in your chart. Okay. So if you've never seen an astrological chart before, this will seem strange, but I think most of you probably have at this point and a Western astrological chart specifically, where we're using the circle chart. This is what we're orienting to today. And Western, I always put in quotation marks when I talk about Western astrology. So when we're thinking with the IC, we're thinking with one of the angles, what we call the angles. And the most commonly known angle in the chart is the horizon line. It is literally the horizon line wherever you are on Earth. So wherever you are right now, if you orient to the east, and I'm actually oriented to the east right now, I'm looking at the ascendant of the astrological chart of the moment that I am in on the place I am in on Earth right now, right? So that is the ascendant. It's not always exactly due east. Sometimes it goes a little bit south or north, depending on the season, depending on our latitude. But for the most part, the ascendant is east. This is where the sun rises, right? This is where everything rises. So the descendant, which is the other side of the angle, which in astrological jargon is known as the ascendant, descendant, or sometimes notated in English as the AC/DC, right? That's west. That's just behind us. So this is the point where the sun sets in the sky. So ascendant, sun rising, descendant, sun setting. This is the astrological chart. It is literally showing us we are kind of the little dot in the middle. So when you're asked when making your astrological chart to put in your location, that's because the angles specifically are the thing in the chart that are most important and most place-based in the chart. So to where you were when you were born, or where anything is at the moment that you're making a chart for that moment. So that's why the place is so important and your location. So we have the ascendant where the sun's rising, the descendant where the sun's setting. This top half of the chart here is when the sun or the planets are above the horizon. And this is below the horizon, everything down here at the bottom. Okay? East and west. This is how we can think about it in Orient. So there's another angle, though. So there's the ascendant and descendant. And then in most types of Western astrology, you're going to also think with what we call the midheaven or the medium caeli, which is Latin for the middle of the sky, or the MC as it's notated. And then The other side of that angle, so that one's way up here. The other side of that angle is the imam chele, which is the IC, which is who we're relating with today. And this is the bottom of the sky or the below. I think of it I think of the IC as the deepest heavens, because sometimes the midheaven is the middle heaven or the top of the top of the heavens, and then down here we're at the bottom of the sky. So we're thinking with this being east, right? The sun rises here over the course of the day, moves through this whole top of the chart, and then at sunset will be about here. So right now where I am, it's just after 10 a.m. in the morning, and the sun, I can see it. It's kind of right there. I'm in the northern hemisphere. And it's winter. So the sun is quite low in the sky and it's to the south. Okay. So the sun is going to be somewhere around here in the sky, in the astrological chart of my moment. Okay. And the IC, just as the descendant this is our horizon line, just as the descendant here is opposite the ascendant, the IC is always opposite the midheaven. It's just angled, kind of up and down, north and south, depending on where we are on Earth. And this changes. And this is one of the things that makes the midheaven IC kind of tricky. And if you do know some things about astrology, you maybe haven't heard as much about the midheaven IC, or you've only heard about the midheaven as being this important point in the chart. And that's partially because Western astrology, period, really privileges the ascendant and the midheaven more than the descendant and the IC. And we're not going to get into all that today. There's lots and lots of reasons for that. But the descendant and the IC tend to, at least in the written literature that I'm familiar with, in my traditions of astrology, they are just kind of neglected. And I myself come from the prairies in Canada. My people, my peop my parents and three of my grandparents were both also born in the prairies of Canada. And this is one of the flattest places on Earth. That's not a desert or that's not um, tundra. It is a flood glacial landplain. And so when you're standing where I'm from, you can actually see the curve of the earth because there's so few hills and even so few trees. It's not barren. It's very agricultural, but you can actually almost see the curve of the earth. So you're literally standing kind of on top of the earth wherever you are. And this is part of why, as a child, astrology was so important to me, I think, because it really right-sized my own relationship to the earth, which my people, when they go back into Europe, they are Slovenian and Romanian peasants, Irish peasants. They are people who are devoted to the land, despite disruptions and despite migrations. And I inherited a lot of that, despite also their presence as colonial settlers in Canada as well. They held a lot of those traditions when they came with, or that came with them, and spirits that came with them too. And so being able to think about the astrological chart as exactly where we are on Earth, I find takes a lot of what is technical and is abstraction and allows us to really be in it in a more specific way. And the midheaven and the IC is this very strange mathematical relationship with the celestial sphere that is entirely dependent on where we are on Earth and changes drastically depending on where, latitude-wise, north and south, we are on Earth. And I find these things that are complex because they are so specific to be some of the things in astrology that I love the most. It doesn't make them that friendly to, pop social media content, etc. But if you're already relating with the earth, if you're already relating with the spirit realm, this is one of the places in the chart that really can ground your astrology and ground just where you are in your experience of time, because that's all astrology is. It's a description of our experience of time. It's how we relate with the spirits of time. So if you're in the northern hemisphere, the midheaven is going to be the sun's path in the south, right? If you're in the southern hemisphere, the midheaven is going to be the sun's path in the north. Okay, that's basically all you need to know. This isn't that important. I just wanted to be specific about this because some of you might be in the southern hemisphere. But when you're thinking with the directions, how to locate the IC is if you're in the northern hemisphere, the IC is the north. And if you're in the southern hemisphere, the IC is in the south. And the IC midheaven breaks at really extreme latitudes. It goes all over the place. So we're not going to get into all that technical stuff today. This is just a pretty simple way to be like, where are you right now in this moment? Whenever you're thinking with your astrological chart, I encourage you to orient to it in this directional way, since this is already so important to how we live as humans and how we relate to the earth as humans. Okay. And the IC is that one at the bottom of the chart. Okay, so if you're looking at an astro.com chart or you're already familiar with this is the chart that you will see if you use that website. So if you're using the default, the IC is easy to find because it's actually marked here on the chart, right? Here's the midheaven up here, and the IC, you can actually see it, and they put it in here. And this is because of some technical stuff I'm not going to get into. But if you are using whole sign houses, which Anna showed you how to do, and which I do encourage you to use, they're not going to mark it. I put this little IC in here. It's not actually marked because they only mark the ascendant and the midheaven, right? So what you're going to have to do if you're using whole signs is find your midheaven and then make an exact line, in your mind to the opposite place in the chart. Okay? And that's going to be your IC. It's a little tricky, but you can do it. I believe in you. Jupiter is making it really easy in this example. This is the chart I'm relatively close to New York. So this is the chart for right now. And so the midheaven up there where I was pointing, where the sun is close to here, right? Is starting to, the sun's getting to that point over there, right? And then the IC, Jupiter, is underneath me right now, down there, towards the north, on this side of me. Jupiter is somewhere under the horizon as a planet. Just like we love Jupiter. Jupiter is a greater benefic. We love Jupiter. Okay. And if you don't know your chart yet, we can hold this in mind and return to it in the question and answer period. But if you do, the first things to consider when you're thinking with the IC in astrology, and we'll get out of the technical head in a second, is the zodiac sign where the IC is located, and then the planet who is in charge of that sign. And we can get into that too, and there's some bonus slides if you want to figure that out after our time together today. So right now, the IC in this chart of the moment is down here, and this is the sign of Cancer. And Cancer has a very intimate relationship with the moon. And we can find the moon in the chart over here. So we're not going to get into all this, but if you're here, if you're at this level with your astrology, this is the first things I want you to consider when you're thinking about this. Okay. So what is the IC more generally when we're thinking? It's
Sorry,
like,
the
okay,
ruler of Aquarius is Uranus and Saturn, right?
Yeah. You can use either. I
Mhm.
use Saturn because I work with the traditional planets primarily, but you can also use Uranus. I think it's really interesting to think with both of them quite often. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you,
Cool.
Nini, also for the question. But I want to remind you, let's first listen in. So it's also simpler
That's
for the
okay.
ones who watch it later,
Yeah,
and then we can bring the questions at the end. But
yeah,
thank you, Nini.
yeah. Appreciated. Yeah, any quick clarifications like that, it's okay. But yeah, I agree with you, Anna. Thank you very much. Okay, so the IC, no matter how you relate to it technically or anything, or even if you never learn anything else about astrology, which astrology is not part of everyone's path. It doesn't have to be. For some of us, it is a very important part of our path. But the IC itself pinpoints an essential tether, a root, an anchor, and it is a fertile source of knowledge and connection that honestly is neglected and denied, and for reasons such as patriarchy and colonialism and sort of solar dominant narratives of culture. And there's lots of things that go into why a point like this in the chart would be underappreciated in the astrology as it's been inherited through the West. Um, there's lots of reasons why this point in the chart would be neglected, but it is such a fertile, beautiful source of knowledge and connection, especially for those of us on ancestral, creative, and magical paths. And my work with astrology comes primarily through my client work. I've worked with people one on one for a decade. Even before that, I was kind of aware of the IC. I was trying to figure it out myself because sometimes I would look at the chart and I would be like, where is this weird spiritual psychological problem I'm having? What is going on here? And I would go to my chart. Someone first read my chart when I was like 10, so I've been doing this a while. And I would just keep coming to the IC. It's like no matter what I looked at in my chart, I would just keep dropping down to the IC and finally decided to do some real research and then some real writing. And that's how the book came to be and how all this work came to be. But honestly, when I think back on it, I'm a little flabbergasted that I heard so few people talking about the IC earlier in my astrological studies. Um, but it also makes sense because the intuitive, the embodied, the earth connection, the ancestral connection, these are aspects of life that are neglected under global capitalism and empire and these ideological forces that can really try to cut people off from these paths, right? And of course, over the last however many years, in many places around the world, reconnections have been working. And I see Anna's work as a very important part of this, and my own work as part of this as well. So the IC, and this is one of my favorite paintings to think with the IC. This is Virgin Sophia of the Night by an artist, Anael, who's Bulgarian. Um, I think she's just beautiful because when we think of the angles as moving the sun, as being responsive to the sun as it moves across the sky. I just love this and her cloak bringing the night. Um, so the IC can be the mystery, the void, the abyss, the all, the threshold, the shadow, the hidden and unknowable, anything hidden and unknowable. It can be the night that existed long before day did and will outlive our sun and us all. It's also more than this, but it can be these things. So if you already have a relationship with ideas like this, you probably already have a relationship with your IC. And how aspects of these things land in your body and land in your experience of your life probably has your IC has some things to say about that in terms of whether these experiences are more positive and nourishing or more challenging and harsh. What is happening with our IC can speak to our relationship with all of this. So this is a couple. Both of these people are people I've studied with, Melanie in person, Erin, just through her work. She recently passed, bless her, who are astrologers working in the Western psychological tradition of astrology, who are some of the only people who have really reckoned with the IC in astrology. And there's a really big reason for that in terms of revaluing of the psychological, of the spiritual, of the archetypal. This was a lot of what this generation of astrologers was doing in English language astrology. And so Aaron Sullivan writes, like the roots of a great ancient tree, the IC is our own source of deep earthy nourishment and lifeblood, is underground, hidden, and protected from the light of day. And then in Melanie Reinhardt on the IC, this is my favorite thing anyone else has ever said about the IC. She says, it is not so much the structure of tradition, because the IC can be associated with tradition and the traditions that were handed, but the felt sense of it. I love this felt sense of tradition. And I think that comes in so strongly when we're relating with our ancestors, for better and worse, can be this felt sense of tradition, because sometimes it can feel very restrictive, and then sometimes it can feel very expansive. And I think our IC can really speak to those nuances in how we experience tradition. So it is the roots, but even more than that, when I'm thinking with the IC, it can be related as the entire mycelial network. That's the network of fungus that exists in most soils around the earth, that is all interconnected. And it is this network that allows plants and the microbes and everything. It offers them sustenance. It offers protection. It can function as an immune system for the plants in an ecosystem. It even facilitates communication, which of course science is catching up with, and many people have known forever. And there's just like more and more that is being learned about this mycelium in the soil that connects us all. And this is just an image of it. And so there's roots here, but then the roots actually are simply one part. They're the way the plant connects into the mycelial system. So if you pull up especially like a plant who's growing in its like a wild plant, if you pull it, if it's healthy and it's growing where it likes to grow, if you pull it up, you're going to see not only the roots, but also all of this fungal weird stuff that is actually facilitating communication and protection and sustenance of that plant with other plants and with the ecosystem as a whole. So to me, this is like we're expanding this analogy that we most often use to relate with the IC, which is the roots, like the roots of a tree. And we are expanding it to understand the IC as this entire mycelial network. And if you already work with the ancestors, or if you are interested in working with the ancestors, whether that's ancestors of blood or land or vocation or culture or practice, you come to know that the ancestors function very similarly to a mycelial network, right? They function for sustenance, for protection, for communication, and so much more. So just as we can understand the IC, whether in analogy or literally, right, as this way we're tethered into the mycelial network of the earth themselves, this is also where the ancestors are in the chart. So they are also at the IC. Okay, your IC. So for those of you who have already found your IC in the chart, you are in one of these little descriptions. So if you have Aries on your IC, this is you. If you have Taurus, this is you. Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. I'm a Pisces IC. So one of these charts is like your chart. Even if you don't know it yet, one of these is you. And you don't have to know it. You can figure it out later. But just thinking with that for a second, it's like all of us with our varying complexities of experiences, with our shared and differential histories of our own living histories, as well as our ancestors' histories. It's like we are still, as we are born into the place we're born, at the time and the location we're born, our chart fits into one of these 12 ways of connecting into that IC mycelial ancestral network. And this is part of why it's important, because connection's great, right? We love connection, we love nourishment, we love protection. These things are great. But what does that do, right? Sometimes it, of course, is a good in itself in terms of our own health and well-being and relationships, spiritual practice, of course, but also oftentimes people come to astrology and people come to ancestral work, ancestral healing work, because they want to do something or they want to be something, right? We want to contribute. We want to contribute the best we can and in a way that is sustainable and worthwhile and beautiful and generative and healing for the planet and our relationship with this beautiful planet we call home. So the IC, you really can't disconnect it from the midheaven. Yes, we're starting at the IC because that's a pretty radical, and radical being a word that in English, the root of the word literally is related to the roots to get to the bottom of the thing. It's a kind of a radical way to think with the chart, but inevitably the IC, we can't disconnect it from the midheaven, right? We can't disconnect it from that point at the top of the chart, which is way easier to access and recognize in our own experience, right? If you already know your midheaven, you've maybe never thought of your IC before. But the IC as this mycelial supportive network, every action of our midheaven, and the midheaven is often where we locate the contribution, our contribution. It can be associated with career, but it's not always career as in what we get paid for. It can be vocation, it can be practice, it can be whatever tends to be public and of social contribution from our chart. So every action, creation, and moment that brings our midheaven into focus is embedded in a lineage and entangled in a network of relationships, which we can see at our IC. So when we understand the IC as more mycelial, as this expansive collective connector, then the understanding of our own individual contributions to society, to our culture, to our country, to our social spheres also inevitably expands. It doesn't have to just be limited to the thing we get paid money for in order to pay for our housing, right? Although that can be part of it for sure. There is a way that it is so much more than that when it comes to contributing in this way that is more robustly supported by our ancestors and by and contributing to social connections and collective well-being in the earth itself. So it's very simply, we can think of this, if it's the IC as the soil, the midheaven is what grows from that soil. And if you're getting really nerdy, and I'm currently doing a horticulture certificate in my own bringing the best of my ancestral inheritances, which includes a lot of farming in my lineages. What grows in soil also it gives back to the soil. And this is part of how we can, when we think of astrology cyclically and living like this, our contributions that can be public, that can be social, these things, those actually can contribute back to this I see mycelial network, right? And of course, this shows up in like gratitude, like Anna and I, of course, we're always thanking our people for the work that we do, right? And that is an example of this nourishing field that can be described by the I see midheaven in the chart. And plants, the more tied in to a locality a plant is, the more that the nutrients in its stalk and stuff and the flowers and everything grows. If it's just left there and the more it contributes to the soil itself and the health of the soil. And this is really, really nerdy, but it does function botanically. Okay. And these are sort of questions to frame all today, and we'll come back to this a little bit when we do practice after a little bit of Q&A, after a little bit of chatting with Anna. But my question when we're thinking with this, and you don't have to know any astrology other than just knowing that you have this point in your chart, even if you don't ever learn how to read it, but even just knowing that this exists, right? When you were born, there was an IC as described by this tradition of astrology when you were born, and you have it throughout your entire life. So the questions being, what if your IC, even with the struggles it comes with, even with the harsh experiences it might come with, what if it is already and still a nourishing mycelial network that supports your life? Where in your life are you already connected into this sustaining, protective, communicative network? This can show up in any sphere of life. And this is where you can get really nerdy in the astrology of it and see how the chart fully works with this question specifically. And thinking about how does this supportive network, which we can locate at your IC, how does this tether your contributions, which is your midheaven? And the secret question of this being, how can your contributions further support your connection into this supportive network? Okay. Okay, that was a lot.
Thank you, Pallas.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Super interesting. Thank you so much for laying this out. I loved the mycelium that you bring this in, as it's not only a metaphor, allegory, it's actually a real thing. That's what our IC is. And I love how you connect astrology and the, connectedness with the land, with the earth, with the old ways of being, which don't need to be old. They're just like being aware that there's life web around us and being like real, beings, humans, interconnected beings on this plane. So thank you for that. And for all of you watching, being here, I highly recommend. I just put Pallas web page in the chat. For those of you who are just watching, it's 9ofwands.com. So there are like a lot of offerings of Pallas, and I do really recommend their workbooks. From my own experience, they have like many offerings there, but also workbooks, for example, which you could work with. And I know that you offered one, and it was so good to have them, because I love the way how you bring in like really really good questions for reflection. They're not like just like some superficial questions, but they go deep, and they're also very kind, so we can stay kind with ourselves during self-reflection. So Having said that, I would love if you'd like to bring a little bit so you explained to us and showed us how all of us have the IC in a certain, like in a this position of one of the 12 ways that it will be in some of the 12 signs. And then when we look up our chart, we will see, okay, there is like, my ICs, for example, in Aries, and I don't have really planets there, like not the major planets at least. But you will see what your planet there is and what is placed there. So could you, on basing it on an example, to just that we understand how can we, when we read this, how can we relate it to an actual story of like, how can this reflect in our story in relation to our ancestors? Could you talk about that?
So I included in the slides, which I'll bring back up, I actually included part of my own chart
Oh, thank you.
to potentially use as an example. So perfect. Um, and because I think I mean, I'm here, you're meeting me. It's helpful. My book has 16 client case stories from my work, and it's a very in-depth interview process. Now, that book itself is quite geared towards like other consulting astrologers, and a lot of it can be pretty high level. I'm actually working on a workbook addendum to the IC, which will be more beginner intermediate and thinking more with there's like less of the jargon stuff in it. And what else did I do recently? Um, oh, I actually have it in a slide. Let me see. I did a podcast recently with Chris Brennan on, where is it? I thought I put it in here. Trying not to scroll on screen. Oh, there it is. There it is. With Chris, and it's a full 3 hours of Chris Brennan and I talking. But
Chris
in it,
can go very, yeah,
yeah,
Chris
we
can go
actually did
very,
a
very
we
deep
did a
into a
survey
matter.
with our audiences and got IC signatures, got examples. And so we got it down to 20 examples. Um, and so it's us going through the charts. And again, if you're more of a beginner, a lot of things you'll just have to let kind of go over your head. But we actually read out loud people's descriptions of their own stories. And so this is a really juicy one if you want to see, and because we made sure to get ICs in houses, which we're not so much going to get into today, but this is a really good way to think with that, and also signs. So you can zoom with that, and then we'll um, go back to my example here, so you can see how this functions in my own chart. Okay, so this is just a little bit, this doesn't have everything in my chart, but it has the ones that are really relevant to my IC signature, which is just what I call thinking with that. When you're starting looking at the IC in chart, um, I call that your IC signature. So my IC is in Pisces, as I mentioned. Okay. And if we're thinking with houses and we're thinking with whole sign houses, it's in my fourth whole sign house because I'm a Sag rising. So the fourth house in astrology is associated with family and land and real estate and the father, especially, where the 10th is more associated with the mother. This stuff is quite mutable when you're actually working with people's lives. Um, and the fourth house is the traditional home of the ancestors themselves as well, but specifically ancestors of family, of blood, of inheritance. So if your IC, this is just quick, if your IC is in the fifth, and you're thinking with the ancestors of culture, of practice, of sexuality, might actually be more important to the story of your contributions than your own blood familial ancestors. Although, of course, everybody has this fourth house in their chart, and everybody that is part of everyone's story. Humans on Earth at this point, they haven't superseded that technologically yet. And then if the IC is in the third whole sign house, this can be ancestors of practice and of location, like of environment, like ancestors of neighborhood can be really quite important to people with the IC in the third. And literature, books, poetry, writing, thought can also be so, and those ancestors can be quite important to people's contributions when their IC is in the third and such. So it does shift like that. So with me, with the IC in the fourth, this is one indicator that my actual blood lineage ancestors, my familial ancestors, the ancestors that tie me to land in a very specific embodied way will be more important. And sure enough, even just thinking with Pisces, which is a water sign, which is mutable, a lot of my life has been wrangling with the history of displacement and complicity in colonialism of my European ancestors coming to Canada. My growing up in the prairies, we have my father taught education at the university. So this is Pisces is ruled traditionally by Jupiter. In modern, it is ruled can have a relationship with Neptune as well. And so Jupiter, the planet of higher education and faith and knowledge, is in my third house. And the third house is also a house of education. Often the kind of like the local school and the local church will be in the third, versus the ninth is more like the religion as a bigger entity. The third is the house of that like local ritual and the routine that goes into like local worship and neighborhood worship. And so Jupiter being in that third, I basically grew up on this like small town university campus where my dad taught. And it was like I practiced, I had like I was in the choir where we sang. And so this is very much an important part of my story. And so this connecting me into the lineage of teaching, the lineage of writing, um, most of my ancestors were not highly literate, but my father's father was already a university graduate, and he was born before 1900, which is quite absurd in Canada specifically. And so he almost went into seminary to become a priest, but then was called to go out west to take up farming, which this is a quite common thing to go back to farming, really. And so this is a pretty important part of that story. And being having the land and having the relationships with like the history of residential schools in Canada, my parents never protected me from that. They were very open with me in a way where I understood quite young the complicity of my own family in that violence, in the attempted genocide of Indigenous peoples in Canada specifically. And I really understood that, which was a choice of my parents to allow a young child to be so aware of that, especially how sensitive I was. But I think it was partially because I was already so sensitive to ghosts, and I was very sensitive to violence. Pisces in sort of sun sign astrology is quite a sensitive sign, so definitely see that already. And so all through school and then going into my into my undergrad in college, my university education, I studied land and literature and indigenous environmental studies and critical animal work. Um, and this was all sort of wrangling with this history while also um, really focused in an academic way, right? Jupiter, third house. And then if you go up here, Virgo is where my midheaven is. And my Mercury is in Leo in the ninth. And the ninth house is that house of religion and also higher education and also publishing and astrology and divination. Um, anything that you would go to a monastery to study, that's the ninth house. And so having this be my chart, I literally left home to go to the Eastern Canada to study these things and to try and learn how, as a culture, specifically in Canada, we can learn to relate better and we can do better, right? Yeah, so that's that. And then I had my Saturn return. My Saturn is over here in Scorpio in the 12th. Of course, as I said, I already knew astrology from being a kid, but it was kind of in these years of trying to be like a scholar and an academic and participate in like national civic life, which is definitely an expression of this. Then my Saturn return hit. I had a pretty brutal mental health crisis. I was in grad school. Um, things were things were um, things were happening that I didn't understand. I was already like witchy and weird and whatever, and it just kind of took over in a good way, in a supportive way. And sort of peak of my Saturn return, which is Saturn in Scorpio, there was a standoff in Eastern Canada, a blockade against fracking with an Indigenous community there who was protesting it. And the national police were sent in, and there was violence. And I just felt, even with all of my scholarship and all of my writing and journalistic work, I just felt so helpless. And I went to my people, and that was when my daily ancestor practice started. I lit a candle and I sat down, I made an altar, and I said, "What the fuck?" I said, "What in the world? Like, I'm trying here. I'm trying, and this isn't like this is a mess." Um, and I got really mad, which is Saturn and Scorpio. And this is in a relationship with my IC here. Um, and then I got sent astrological magic and I got sent deeper connection to magic and witchcraft and my ancestors and my writing and astrology. And eventually, just a couple years later, I started offering people readings. And and I quit academia, which took a while, but I firmly sort of went on to the path of like astrologer and healer and person invested in cultural repair, and that being done outside of the academe, but still within networks such as the Ancestral Lineage Healing Practitioner Program, Ancestral Medicine, networks like that. And this being still an expression of my ninth house here, here, and then the third house in here, which of course the internet is also lives in these places. And I think the sort of nail, whatever, the pinpoint, the punctuation mark of this, the example is that Jupiter, so we have a Jupiter return every 12 years. So I had my Jupiter return in about 2021, 2020, 2021. And then eventually Jupiter was in Pisces in 2022, came to my IC. I had already been writing the IC book for since 2018. And then when Jupiter came to my IC, that's when we successfully crowdfunded it. And so pre-orders, we decided to self-publish. Pre-orders were done through Kickstarter, and it was almost like a semi-viral campaign. It was the community, just really all the connections I had made through this change work, this culture work, just really wanted the book. And yeah, and it was just so this is the ruler of my IC in the sky coming to the place of my IC in my chart. And that was just such a beautiful, it still took me a couple years to actually get it out, but it was it's probably the contribution of my life. Like, I'm only 40, like who knows what'll happen. But in terms of an object that is indicative and expressive of like my Virgo midheaven contribution, my Mercury in Leo in the ninth house of publishing and of astrology, right? With this IC and Pisces being so invested in collective experience and collective healing, with my Jupiter in Aquarius in the third of doing things a little differently and thinking a little differently, and taking us to the bottom of the chart, right? And the third and the ninth being the houses of the wanderer, of the outsider, of going to the hermitage, right? And this being yeah, and the book being like such a hardcore expression of
Thank
that.
you, Pallas. That is so interesting, and thank you for your for bringing also this part of like the transition when there are transitions
Yeah.
happening, that they're activating it, so it gives us an in-depth understanding of how it looks in the natal chart for us and how we can read it, but then also bringing in also the other layers, so when the planets will come through and they will activate it. So we could move further, being aware that we want to do the practice. Do you think we could also bring in the practice part, so we have also time for question and answers?
Yeah,
I don't want
I
to
don't think we
interrupt
need
you,
any
but
more like interviewee stuff. I think we can do practice because I feel like that's a very
yeah,
good expression of what it
yeah,
is, and how it can look. And then I think practice and Q&A for sure. Yeah, and I can
wonderful, good.
no pressure on anyone else, but I can also stay a few minutes if there's more Q&A. So
Thank you. Good. Sounds great. Then let's move to the practice. And first of all, thank you so much for bringing in not only your knowledge but also exposing your natal chart and the story of how it has been in your experience and how it impacted you, and also about that Saturn in Scorpio thing, like, oh my God, the collective being like totally out of bounds and then coming back to the ancestors and having this moment of like, I'm angry. What are we doing here? What's happening? I want to do here something, but then, life. So thank you for that. It's real. It's like that. And yeah, we can bring that directly to them. That's so much more loving
exactly.
than avoiding
Yeah.
it, the real stuff. Yeah. Good. Wonderful. Then are we ready to go into the practice and then have from a grounded way from all of us? We've chatted so much and I love chatting, and we can bring in questions in a way that's grounded when we also settled in, and we have prepared for you wonderful settling in that is thematically connected to the mycelium. Pallas has created yummy prompts and I will just drop you in. And we won't do it so long, like 10 minutes all in all, something like that, Pallas. Great. Okay.
Yeah, I
Good.
think because once you drop in, I feel like we're already kind of there. And so it's just a matter of shifting slightly. So we won't go too long, I think.
Good. All right. Then whoever is watching and you who are here, let's bring our attention inward in a sense of like just bring the attention back to center. Make yourself comfortable. If it helps, close your eyes, whatever works, so you can really bring attention down to the roots. And once you brought the focus back to your center, feel grounded, call in your spirit allies, or what it is, something bigger than you, and something that is a support in your life, a bigger support. May it be the notion of love or nature or specific spirit ally. Just call in your support, your spirit support to you. Ask it to cleanse your space so there's nothing in your space that's not good for you or is not you. And make sure that you have a healthy layer of protection around your personal space. And once you're there, just sense into that space, being centered, supported, and protected.
And from this place of being rooted and protected, lean even a little bit further back. If you're already lying down, take a breath into your neck muscles a little bit. Maybe relax your jaw a little bit. Feel how you are being held up, whether it's the earth beneath your feet, the chair beneath your seat, the pillow behind your head. Feel how you are already being supported. This can also bring up recognition of how you are not being supported. Just gently ask your people, ask the guiding spirits around you to just hold that right now, to hold you in place in those spots that don't feel supported. Focus on where you do. It's probably below you. It's probably gravity. It's probably the earth. Now gently come into awareness that this solidity below you is actually a network. It isn't just one mass, one object. It is a weaving. It is a weaving that has been crafted by hands of rock and stone and earth and soil. If you're inside somewhere, it's been crafted by human hands as well. Now, in that rock and soil beneath you, gently recognize that these are also alive, and they are also supporting you. Just as the human hands who crafted the chair that you sit on, the floor under your feet, the building you're in, the earth and rock and plant and soil, the tectonics that hold the earth together in all of her movement. They are all conspiring to support life on earth. Now coming to your own center, recognizing the ways that just by being here, just by breathing, by feeling into your connection to this earth, you are contributing through this love and through this appreciation, through this recognition of connection. Feeling this reciprocity between you. I challenge you to soften into it a little bit more. To really let what support that's coming through in a little bit more. And then slowly keeping it with you, but returning to center. Slowly come back to social space together. Thank your guiding spirits. Thank your wise people. Thank your body for doing this with you. Stretch if you need to. Thank you for being here and for your trust and for feeling into that place that is the IC.
Thank you for that exercise that really allows us to feel the IC and in the embodiment, in the experience. And feel free to bring your questions if you have and if you'd like. For our remaining time, we might be able to go a little bit over. Thank you for that offer, Pallas, but we won't go too much over, maybe 5 more minutes, only to respect the time of those gathered. So please go ahead. You can either click raise your hand, or you could also just go ahead and unmute yourself.
I have two questions. One more specific, another more abstract. Specific one is I don't have my birth time, and I lost hope of ever finding it from anyone. So that's the reason I am not too into the theory or practice of astrology. So what's
Okay,
what?
I found
Oh, Siri got desire to answer that question instead of you, Pallas. So
Could you try again?
come on, what's the way? And the abstract is, I got interested in how the IC is, how the patriarchy is fighting it, and what's your view on it? What's the story there?
Kindness to the lack of a birth time. That is a thing I've seen many people struggle with who otherwise want to relate with astrology more. I do believe that rectification works, and I don't practice this myself. I'm not of that mind, but I do, if you want, I'm actually going to put my email in the chat. And if any of you here, but if you want to email me to ask for recommendations for someone to rectify your chart, I'm happy to respond and offer my own recommendations for that. It does work. It does work. It's weird, but it works. So there are ways. Of course, there are ways that cost money, but you can also rectify your own chart, which I think does also work, especially if you have any spirit relationships supporting you in more intuitive work otherwise. I think you can totally do that. And then it's a matter of tracking it and learning to trust it, right? Because there's one thing for someone to be like, this is your birth time. And it's another thing to like actually grow to trust that and to identify with it. But that is definitely a thing that's possible. And maybe this is the little extra nudge that you need to maybe pursue that. Because also rectification as a discipline is the IC is actually one of the places where in Western astrology, rectification relies a lot on the angles. And so even just that you're already thinking with the IC, that might be a little kind of glimmer that this might be a way forward. So yeah, so I hope but if you don't want to rectify, totally legitimate too. I think relating with the chart of the moment. So whether it's on astro.com or if you have an app, like an astrology app, you don't actually have to put your natal chart in. You can just input the current time and your current location, and it'll pull a chart for the moment. And you can actually just learn to relate with that chart. You don't actually have to relate anything to your natal chart if you don't want to. And I think that that is a really powerful way to relate with time. And I actually think focus on the natal chart and the specifics of the natal chart can interfere with people's astrological education in a certain way. And so coming to astrology as you are without actually knowing your natal angles, there's things that you can learn about astrology and relating with the chart of the moment and the planets as they move around and all that, that people who have a natal chart can't, so there's very different ways to go here. And I think both are very interesting, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't relate with astrology just because you don't know your birth time, because it's not true. There's whole traditions like horary as a divination art which doesn't relate with the nativity at all. So yeah, there's lots of ways forward. And feel free to
Horary.
email me. Yeah. So I'm not going to explain this, but you can, it's the chart of the moment, but used as a divinatory technique. It's a whole tradition that works alongside natal astrology. Often when someone would come to an astrologer and they didn't know their birth time, you would work with a horary chart rather than a nativity, and you can ask a specific question and the horary chart will give you specific answers. Yeah. So, yeah, the patriarchy question. I mean, that's a whole thing, but I think, and because we have more questions, I'll probably be a little quick with this one, but in terms of, I mean, the denial and the vilification of the dark comes from a very specific cultural context. And probably my favorite, I forget the writer's name right now. I can include it. There's a really wonderful English language essay by a writer on the relationship between astronomy and like scientific astronomical development, such as like building telescopes and stuff, and the history of that's relationship with British Empire and colonialism. And one of the best, most interesting things that she connects is the French Sun King being both obsessed with astronomy and also obsessed with electric lighting and like getting rid of the dark, right? And this is also the king who crafted the first French police force. So this feels like such a, like getting rid of the dark, banishing the dark, and how that relates to European ideas of enlightenment and how that relates to colonialism and genocide of indigenous peoples and oppression of primitive beliefs, right? Oppression of old ways. This is all, to me, tied into the development of Western astrology specifically and how it was passed through Euro-American intellectual English language dominance, right? And how that has given us the astrology that many of us relate with today. And so there's a place where kind of reckoning with the IC, reckoning with the malefic planets, reckoning with just different ways of being in the chart that don't necessarily fit with the, American corporate globalized, westernized way of being. I think that thinking with places like the IC and with the dark, because not every culture, for sure, has forgotten how to relate generatively and in a healthy way with the dark rather than just fetishizing it. But definitely some of the cultures I grew up in did. So that's part of the work. Yeah, there's a lot to say on that, but I want to make sure we have time for other questions. Thank you for those.
Thank you both. And we have Eka raising the hand. So let's go to Eka. And then we have also a question in the chat.
Okay.
And I think that will be it then for today.
Hello, Pallas. Thank you for the practice and the presentation. So IC is completely unknown territory for me, and happy to discover. Maybe my question is like very case specific, so I'm happy with like a very short answer. But like my IC and MC seem to be like specifically like cutting two houses in half, like exactly on the lines. So in that case, how would you read the houses? Like, because like say they're like IC is between third and the fourth.
Okay, so that's probably because, so are you on astro.com?
Yeah.
So that's probably, did you do the thing where you went to whole sign houses in the options? That
I
was
was
like an
trying
extra
to
step.
catch up. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's probably why. Because in Placidus house system, which is like a nerdy technical thing that most people never have to know anything about, which is the default on astro.com, the IC midheaven angle is what demarcates the beginning of the fourth house. So this is totally a reasonable question and completely relevant to what we're doing today. So you'll want, so you don't have to do anything right now, but you can look at what sign is on your ascendant? Can you see?
In general, like in general, you mean, right? Like I know it's
Yeah,
like
so on the left-hand side of the chart, no, it's okay. It's okay.
it's
That's why we're here.
Sagittarius. I'm ascendant
Okay.
Sagittarius, yeah.
Okay, and then when you look at the sign that your IC is on, without looking at the houses, can you
Sign
see
is
what
Aries.
sign it is? Aries.
Aries.
Okay, so quick trick to figure this out. So Sagittarius, let's count that as one, right? 1 Sagittarius, 2 Capricorn, 3 Aquarius, 4 Pisces, 5 Aries. Okay, so because it's the 5th sign from the ascendant, that means your IC is in the 5th whole sign house. Does that make sense?
Fifth
So when
whole
you're
sign.
counting, yeah. So when we're talking about whether the IC is in the 4th or the 3rd or the 5th, this is an easy way, even if you're looking at a chart that's not in whole sign house system graphically, this is a way that you can just count and you can tell where it is.
So are you saying it's in the fifth one?
Yeah,
Even
because
though
it's
on
in
the
Aries.
current map I'm looking at is absolutely off. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. It's just a different overlay that
Okay, so I didn't follow quick enough, like the guidance
no,
in the
it's fine.
Okay,
Totally
great.
reasonable. Totally reasonable question. Yeah, thank you for that. It's probably helping other people too. Okay, so Tamar asks, with my IC in Scorpio and Pluto right there, what can Pallas tell me about my family's past or any hidden power I have inherited? How do I use this energy to grow? So if you Scorpio ICs in the cohort of people that I serve, which tend to be other people born between 1983 and 1995, which is when Pluto was in Scorpio. Very common. There's 2 Scorpio ICs case stories in the book because of this exact reason. One of the main things I would be curious for you to dig into where your Mars is, even if you're using Pluto as the ruler, as a modern ruler of Scorpio, I would still want you to look at your Mars and see what your Mars will tell you about this question. Because where Mars is in your chart will have a lot to say about that IC and about that Pluto. One thing with outer planets conjunct the IC, and that's outer planets being Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Ceres, who's more similar to Pluto than she is to Neptune and Uranus, which is curious, is that it will show an emphasis on collective issues and connections into those collective issues. So whatever in your own cultural context Pluto signifies, and Pluto is can be power structures, can be relationships of dominion, such as like dominion over land, etc., but people too. One of my favorite things someone has articulated publicly about Pluto is Austin Coppock talks about Pluto minimizing, making very small things that are very large and making very large things that are actually very small. It's the mountain and the molehill. I don't know if you have a similar saying in Georgian as that saying, but it is a matter of perspective for the most part. So Pluto with the IC, and we see this as how it's reflected in cultures around catastrophizing things that are not actually that important, but are sort of distractions from the actual issues, and like sensationalizing, such as like in the news, and then in order to hide the issues that are actually important. So that's like one of these sort of cultural ideological phenomenons that when Pluto's with the IC, you can see it functioning if it's in the fourth with that family dynamic, right? Especially with that family dynamic, that would be a Leo rising chart, or if you're using quadrant house system, but also the making very small of things that are actually very important. And so often Pluto Scorpio charts with the IC will have experienced some minimizing of their own experience. And this is with the IC, this is often an inherited thing. And so that kind of like hiddenness that exists and that power often comes from like the revelation and the valuing of one's own, the validity of one's own experience, even against like authority figures who tell you it's not important. That can be a very common story that is backed by the ancestors who are supporting through that Scorpio IC. Where that works topic-wise will often depend on where your Mars is and what your Mars is doing in terms of the specific like where that power can go in your own life, right? Where it can express. But that would be sort of my general take on that. Oh, how do I use this energy to grow? Yeah, I mean, I think look to your Mars and see what it's doing and where he's doing and where he's focused, to see where you might be minimizing things yourself and where you might be catastrophizing, and sort of wrangling with that right-sizedness that comes with understanding your history, your experience, and your contribution. I hope that's supportive.
Thank you, Pallas, and thank you, everyone. There was a question, if I could please show how to find the whole sign map. We went very quickly there, so it's understandable. I know that we record this, and I will send it to you all, so you can then look it up there and then, pause and then make it quicker. It's pretty simple. Once you go into AstroChart and find your AstroCom and find your chart, before you click on the chart, you just have to choose the whole the house system, which one you want, because the default is another one. So you will be able to see it in the recording. And for those of you who have been with us until the end so far, you here or who is watching, I have a little bonus gift and amazing news, which will come out officially also next week. We are having an ancestral lineage healing in 3-day intensive with our teacher Daniel and 7 supporters of my amazing colleagues. So Pallas, you're so welcome and invited in Georgia if you want to come and meet us in person there. It will be in July 17th until 19th. It will be amazing, and we have a big enough space that we can hold up to 50 people but the spots will be very soon, you know, covered. So I'm sharing it with you here in a pre-secret way, so you can write me if you're interested. I will make the in the newsletter. I'll share the link then as well as soon as it's official. So I'm really glad about that, because our land needs it so much. It's one thing to do it individually, and it's a whole another deal to do it like in a big group together on the land of Tbilisi. So we can also send tending magic on the mycelia into the cultural layers that are really crusty and need that of ours. So good. I'm glad about that. And you're so welcome. Do you think you can come, Pallas? Is it a possibility?
It's a possibility. Maybe the next one feels more likely. But
Okay.
oh my God, I want to visit Georgia so bad. Every
One
time we
day.
meet, I try and like I go on YouTube and try and like teach myself some greetings in Georgian, and then I just get so distracted by how like beautiful the language is, and I'm just like,
I love that.
But,
You like the writing script.
someday it will happen, if not July. But I'm so excited for everyone who gets to participate. That's going to be beautiful. Ugh, good for Daniel. That's great.
Yeah, it will be his last one also. Like, he's not
Okay.
making intensives anymore. He's handing it over to us who are doing the teacher training right now.
Yeah,
But that
makes
would be his
sense.
last one now.
Cool. Oh,
But we
so
will
cool.
continue it, so there will be
Yes.
more opportunity if you cannot come this time. And Georgia is very much welcome you, my dear, and your ancestors. Thank you so much for having been here with us and sharing all that knowledge and this priestess, but also this empress kind of embodied, you know, tarot slang now, but that's what wanted to be named. So thank you. And thanks
Thank
all
you,
of you
Anna.
who came here and been here with us. Thank you for your time and curiosity and your wonderful things that you're attending there. The things in the world with your goodness. Thank you for hanging in, being a human. All right.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
for this gift, Anna and Pallas.
Thank
Very
you.
welcome.
You're also welcome.